Hi, Matt Blocky with EWA.
Jameson Smith with EWA.
Today we are talking about how to minimize a fee structure of your portfolio and maximize your growth in the future. First, we're going to talk about transaction cost. Then we're going to talk about what an advisory fee is, and then we're going to talk about the hidden expenses that sometimes are often not disclosed. So Jameson, why don't you first walk us through what transaction costs and how they will affect a client's portfolio?
Sure. So some firms will charge a cost per transaction, meaning any stock trade or ETFs trade will be a separate fee that you have to pay for placing that trade, would be one example. Another example would be there's certain mutual funds, an A share, for example, would charge an upfront charge, usually around 5% of every time that the mutual fund is purchased. So it can be a lot of different cost hidden to make these transactions, but with EWA will never be applicable. There's no transaction costs on our platform with Fidelity.
Yeah, great point, Jameson. So when we actually started our fee-only RIA, we dropped our brokerage licenses and dropped our ability to even take commissions on any kind of investment product or any kind of investment transaction. So to further that, typically in this industry, in this day and age, if you're working with an advisor, our belief is you should never be paying transaction costs. You should never be paying commissions to get money in or out of a portfolio. We actually have furthered that, and we sponsor what's called a wrap program. So in our advisory fee, which we're going to talk about next, any fee that our custodians charge you, we actually pay on your behalf. So it's an all-inclusive fee that you pay in the advisory fee. Any kind of account maintenance fees or wire fees or overnight fees, whatever that is, those are not applicable. It's just a one easy to understand advisory fee. But most importantly, there's no transaction cost if you're working with the fee-only RIA. Those get eaten up with the wrap program, and those get ultimately paid by us if applicable. So the advisory fee, we actually have industry data here. So just to use an example, the blue that we see on the screen represents the average advisory fee based on account size. So we're going to pick on, $1 to $2 million account. The average advisory fee is 0.85%. The orange represents the hidden cost or the internal cost of the funds themselves. So if you have a portfolio that's made up of ETFs and mutual funds, the average fee, regardless of account size, is 0.65%. So the advisory fee should go down the more money that you have. It's typically like the opposite of tax brackets. The more you have, the lower that fee is. As you can see, the 2 to 5 million, the average 0.75, and then 3 to 5 million, it goes down to 0.65. Part of that, paying that advisory fee, there should be a very strong value proposition on top of diversifying, on top of asset allocating, on top of rebalancing and tax loss harvesting. Our belief is the time, the advice, the concierge service, and the education, and making sure that your money is supporting ultimately your life by design. All of that should be captured in that value proposition of the advisory fee. So that brings us to the hidden cost. So the hidden cost, our belief is it's the advisor's responsibility to keep these as low as possible. So our philosophy is we try to keep that between 0.2 to 0.3%. So more than half less the industry average from the soft cost. The reason we believe this is so important is 80 to 90%, depending on studies that have been looked at, of active mutual fund managers are not able to outperform the indexes when you net out the fees. So in most segments, we do utilize some passive ETFs, exchange traded funds, to properly diversify and allocate your portfolio, and that dramatically drives the cost down. Versus a mutual fund, usually on average is about a 1% management fee, versus an ETF could be as low as like 0.05% or 0.2% on the high end is typically what we see. So that's one way we really control cost. However, with mutual funds, there's also some other hidden cost of doing business in mutual funds. So if we're going to invest in mutual funds, we'd recommend that they're only done in certain sectors where there's a proven track record and history, and also a future forecast that those mutual funds will outpace the index. That's typically easier to do with analysts and information through sectors like emerging markets or international markets. It's much harder to do based upon past performance of all US markets, such as mid cap, small cap, large cap, etc. So Jameson, why don't you close this out? What are some of the other, on top of that, the industry standard fund expense fees being 1%, but if you're working with an advisor and they have access to what's called institutional shares, it's still 0.65. Now again, we try to keep ours between 0.2 and 0.3, but if you're investing in mutual funds, there are some other hidden costs that come into play Tell us about those.
Yeah, so mutual funds, generally they're, like you just said, a lot of hidden costs. One would be really tax inefficient. So if the fund manager is going to make changes and buy and sell stocks within the fund, all of those tax consequences can get kicked out to you that own the mutual fund. So sometimes there's some tax inefficiencies within mutual funds. If you purchase a mutual fund and then the price goes down and you sell it, even though that you have a loss within the fund, there could be gains that the fund manager realizes that could be kicked out to you as the fund owner. So you may not actually be able to realize a loss because of the gains that are realized within the fund. Excellent.
Yeah. So, and just to wrap up this video, if you're with a good, fee-only RIA, what's referred to as a fiduciary, that's regulated by the SEC, in general, all of your advice, all of your time, everything should be all-inclusive, and you should be paying no transaction cost, no commissions whatsoever at any point. The advisory fee, in general, depending on account size, should be somewhere between 0.5 to 1%. And then the internal cost with a good RIA, I'd say, should be between 0.2 to 0.4%. Really, with a good mix of individual securities, individual equities, ETFs, and then some mutual funds where they make sense. Really, the responsibility of the advisor to be very cost sensitive and maximize the growth of your portfolio and ultimately the money that you have to live life by design. Please let us know if you have any questions.